is it? Oh, yeah. Oh, Jesus. She's still
All right. Can everybody hear me? I think they can. Seems like I'm echoing out there somewhere. I believe it's about time to start. Good to see everyone here. Never know exactly what time to start because I'm used to being up in the what do you call that? The young adults class. I don't know if you call it young adults anymore. Huh? We like to think of ourselves as young adults, right? But we've been the young adults for like 25 or 30 years or something like that. I don't know. But it seems like it takes us a little bit longer to all get in there and get going. So this is a much more responsible group in here, I would say. Although I do see like Abby and Sarah and Clay back there, you know, it's glad everybody's here. So yeah, last week Pat had one final series or part of his series that he was teaching on, and so we kind of got our timelines figured out. And glad to be here with you this morning. We're going to start a new series this morning on the Ten Commandments. And I think I know most everyone here. I'm Kurt Jones. My wife and children and I have gone here to church for, I don't know, 20-something years now. It's been a long time, but I'm the athletic director up at the high school, and I think I know most everyone, but I see maybe one or two faces maybe that I do not know. But glad to see you all. Starting a new series on the Ten Commandments. I'll tell you, I actually did this series going back a year or two ago, year and a half ago, with the upstairs high school class. So maybe someone like Tanner has heard parts of it. But and then a few months ago, back in, I don't know, maybe February, March or so, I did this series up in the young adults class, we'll call it, and really had some reasons why as to why I wanted to teach this, and we'll get into some of those reasons here in a little bit. But I know sometimes when we look at some of this and you go, all right, a series on the Ten Commandments, that just seems so distant, seems so long ago, seems so, whatever tag you want to give that, old school, okay? 10 Commandments given to us over 3,000 years ago. And, but, you know, there just seemed to be a need to kind of dust those off, so to speak, and go back and say, all right, let's go back and look at the 10 Commandments and see maybe what they can say to us today in 2022. Can they say anything to us in 2022 that's relevant?
Yes.
I don't know. All right, I already got one strong yes. I believe that was from Sharon over there, right? Sharon? Yeah. I knew I'd probably hear from you today, right? That's okay. That's good. Excuse me. And so, yeah, we'll look at that yes and see why, and we can talk about our opinions and thoughts and ideas on that and see where it takes us. I don't know, I think this will be about a 6-week series. I do know that next week, believe that's right. We're doing Promotion Sunday in here, so I don't think we'll be meeting together as a class, but we can kind of get this introduced and get started this morning, and then we'll pick back up on the 28th, I guess it would be. And so let's go ahead and jump into this. And I want to start really with just asking you a question and try to provoke a little bit of thought here. And I'll start with the question of just asking you to define evil. If someone were to ask you to define evil, how would you define evil? Maybe in just some sort of short answer. Did I hear?
The opposite of good.
The opposite of good, okay? And then we kind of get into, of course, what would be that next question. All right, good versus evil. So going back to defining good or defining evil, anybody got any just simple idea on, let's just stay with evil right now.
Evil good for you.
Morally wrong.
All right, I'm hearing a lot morally wrong.
That which is contrary to the will of God.
That which is contrary to the will. I knew I'd find something real profound from Pat back there. That was good. That was good. What else did I hear?
Wicked.
Wicked. Okay, which then makes us all right. We've got to define wicked. I'll kind of just lean back over towards what Pat was talking about. I think most of us try to gauge that, relate that towards God, the will of God, which then really requires us, right, to know what is the will of God, to be able to understand God, for us to maybe know what evil is, all right? Know what good versus evil is. And I'll just say this right here as we're rolling through this. I always look at the number of my slides that I have and I think, all right, are we moving too fast? I better slow it down. We've still got 25, 30 minutes left, but might require some comments from Stan over here to slow us down a little. But this is really probably where I don't know, I told you about a year and a half, 2 years ago, wanted to teach this series for the first time to the high school class, okay, our teenagers. Because it sure seems in the year 2022 to me that it sometimes can get pretty confusing for us as adults, especially for our teenagers, on what is right, what is wrong, what is acceptable, what's not acceptable. You know, here's an issue. What side of the fence should I stand on in terms of that issue? Where does God stand in relation to that very important issue? And today, if you watch the news at all, if you get on to Twitter or online or watch, whatever news channel it might be, you can see almost every day something that's kicked out that you go, well, it sure seemed like it wasn't too long ago that was unacceptable. That was wrong. We all considered that absolutely wrong. Why are we even having this discussion now? Why are people trying to get us to consider that as something we might take from this category that we've always considered wrong, and I'll pick it up and I'll move it over here now towards it's okay, it's acceptable. And is that confusing sometimes to some of us as adults? Do you ever see that on the news?
Every day.
Every day, okay. That's good to hear that because I didn't see any heads doing anything. I sure do, all right? And I'm 50, all right? And I know a few of you are younger than that in here, but most of you are older than that in here, all right? And I know that you've got to feel the same way. But imagine if you were a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid right now. Think about that. Go backwards to when you were 16, 17, 18 years old. Okay? Got to roll that reel back a little bit, right? Okay? Think about some of the things that were coming at you. And I know some of you go backwards and you think about some of those things that were coming at you and your parents thought were absolutely awful, and they really maybe weren't all that bad in your opinion, okay? But just imagine where some of those teenagers that we have right now, 16, 17, 18 years old, kind of sit right now, and they see that news, and they get a lot of their news nowadays from this, okay, different ways than you do. However it's coming across at them, whether it's Twitter or whatever else. And they're kind of weighing those things out. What is acceptable? What is good? What is evil? What is right? What is wrong? All right? And what's even more concerning, maybe, when I look around in the auditorium here, as I go, all right, Tiffany and Jeremy have a couple of young boys that it's going to be another 10, 12 years before they're teenagers. And Sarah and Clay have some little boys that it's going to be another 10, 12, 14 years before they're teenagers. And then where are we headed by that point in time in terms of knowing, good from evil, right from wrong, all that kind of stuff. All right, I'm going to try to move on here. When we talk about the Ten Commandments, it's in Exodus chapter 20. It's in Exodus chapter 20 where we could all, we all know the story, I think, for the most part, before we get here. But we could kind of do a quick going backwards where God's people are in Egypt. They're slaves in Egypt. And Moses has fled Egypt. And God has come to Moses in a burning bush and told Moses that he wants him to go back into Egypt, right? To go and talk to Pharaoh in Egypt and tell him to let his people go. And we remember that whole story of Moses not feeling like he was worthy and he couldn't speak eloquently enough and all those sorts of excuses that Moses gave, which is probably a whole other series, right, on leadership and thinking about what God can do with us people that have a whole lot of excuses as to why we can't do it, right? We'll maybe do another series one of these days on something like that. But Moses does it. He goes and he leads through a lot of different things that transpire. You remember Moses leads the Israelite people out of Egypt. And at this point in time, they're out in the desert and they're wandering in the desert. But God has brought them to Mount Sinai, and it's time for God to give Moses and the Israelite people the Ten Commandments. And we come across that in Exodus chapter 20. It's interesting to me when you study the Ten Commandments. To me, I don't know if you can think of them as a document, but yeah, you can. Because we always image them being etched into stone tablets, which they were, all right? But if you think of them as a document, stop and think of them for a little while. Has there been any document in the history of the world that has changed humanity for the better? Well, maybe we could go and dig around and find a few things, and we might talk about the Declaration of Independence and some of those sorts of things. But when you come back to it and you put it all together and you think of the Ten Commandments as a document, a historical document, I want us to keep that in mind as we move through looking at, thinking about the Ten Commandments. And maybe we revisit that question at the end of our series. Has there ever been a document that has done more for the betterment of humanity than the Ten Commandments? And I think the answer to that is no. That's the Ten Commandments are profound. They have an impact that has been just immeasurable, really. But this is Exodus chapter 20, again, 1 through 17, and you can go there if you've got a Bible or it's on your phone or whatever, and we'll be reading from there as we go on. But right now, I would just say, as you think about those Ten Commandments being given from God to Moses, then Moses to the people of Israel, and these Ten Commandments, if I were to ask, some of them to us are pretty familiar. If I were to go, Charles, can you name one of the Ten Commandments? I bet Charles could name one of the Ten Commandments. He'd probably think one of the familiar ones. Thou shalt not kill, right? Or something like that. I think some of those are very familiar to us, that we can probably rattle off. But if I were to go, can you list all 10 of them? I think most of us would kind of probably go, I think I could get 7 or 6, 7 or 8 maybe. I don't know if I could roll off all 10. Maybe some of you could. That's great. All right. We'll look at all 10 of them and their impact, not only 3,000 years ago, but today. But of course, those 10 commandments are given by God to Moses to give to his Israelite people for a reason. Okay? And they list out a lot of things we should do, a lot of things we should not do, right? Yes, y'all remember that? Let me ask this question just for fun, I don't know why. We'll just ask it. Okay, maybe it'll help us to understand why God gave the Ten Commandments. But next question: why did God not give the Ten Commandments to Adam and Eve? In your opinion? Don't know that this matters so much, but maybe it kind of does. Ms. Parker, do you have an answer?
He gave them one. Yeah.
You gave them one.
He gave them a perfect world and said, don't eat from this tree.
Okay, you gave them one commandment back then. And did they keep it?
No.
They seem to have had a tough time keeping that one commandment. Okay? Which is probably like what we do with the Ten Commandments. But think about it again. Just anybody have any other thought or idea? Giving these to Moses way on down the historical line and timeline, and why do we not just create Adam and Eve and bam, there you go, there's your Ten Commandments? Why did God not give Adam and Eve the Ten Commandments? In your opinion, I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just...
Was there good and evil in it?
Say it again, Sam.
Was there good or evil? Did they know what was good?
Did they know what was good and evil?
Did they
He
need
gave
that?
man a choice, a chance to be able to make their choices.
Okay.
And by the time the Ten Commandments came up, they were not making the right choices.
Gave man the opportunity to make choices, and man was maybe not making such great choices at that point in time. And so then at this point in history, from what I'm hearing, God says, all right, I'm going to give you 10 commandments.
Time hasn't taken place long enough for them to develop all this thinking.
Okay?
That's the way I always looked at it.
Kind of the same as what Ms. Schubert was saying. Kelvin's saying maybe not enough time has panned out for some things to transpire, for women's behavior to transpire enough to where God says, all right, now I'm seeing your decisions, your choices are not so good. I'm going to give you the 10 Commandments. Sharon?
The Israelites were just released from slavery, so they were going nuts. None of us can even imagine being a slave. And then all of a sudden, you can do whatever you want. And they were going crazy.
Yeah.
And that's why the Ten Commandments came about.
Good point.
And yet,
When we look at it from the Israelites having been in slavery, and now all of a sudden they have
Freedom.
a lot of freedom, okay? They're not under Egyptian control anymore. They have freedom. So I think a very good point, probably a very good reason as to why these come at the time that they do. Did I hear Pat making another comment?
well, so, I mean, along with what Sharon said, though, you know, the 100 years that it took Noah to build the ark, and what God said, every thought in their mind, every act, every thought is given over to evil.
Yeah.
And so God destroyed it. So it's kind of along with what Kelvin is saying, that it took a fulfillment of time to get people's minds to the point where you could get the law, which would define sin, which would turn people back to God. That's kind of my thought. I
Okay.
really don't know. That's all I could come up with.
No, I'm with you, and I think many of these comments I
You know,
really
there's always
agree
something
with.
Everybody has used it, has heard it. Experience is the best teacher.
Yeah, experience is the best teacher.
Go through
Yeah.
life a while, to have some experience of what, hey, that didn't work very good.
Right.
We always want, we think about living in a perfect world.
Right.
God gave Adam and Eve a perfect world, and they couldn't handle it. We can't either. That's why we need grace today.
God gave Adam and Eve a perfect world and gave them basically one commandment. And they struggled to, they couldn't keep it. They just, every inclination of man's heart was evil, was against that. I'll give you a thought that I have. I don't know that it's the right thought. It's my opinion, really. But maybe it kind of ties into what I've heard out of some of you, okay? And to me, God desires a relationship with every single one of us, okay? And I believe that's why He gave us free will. All right, it would have been, God could have created all of us like robots and programmed into our little microchip the 10 Commandments and all those things that made us just march like good little soldiers, and we're all robots and we all do exactly what God wanted us to do from the beginning, okay? But God desires a relationship with us. And therefore, He gave us free will, okay? And for God to have a relationship with us, and I'm going to kind of shift gears here and change tracks, but you think about, for those of you that are married or have been married or dating or whatever, and you think about a relationship with your spouse and when that all started, okay? What did you need to know about that person you were dating? Well, you needed to know a whole lot about it, right?
Yes.
You wanted, that first date, you might have asked a ton of questions. And then that second date or the next telephone call or whatever it was, you asked more questions. And it took time to dive deep and to try to figure out what that person was all about and ask those questions and see if I'm compatible with this, if this is the type of person, if this is the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with, right? And so when you think about our relationship with God, does God need to ask Louise a bunch of questions about what she's all about? I don't think so. God created her.
He knows.
He knows. He knew from the time she was born to the time she was a teenager to on the rest of her life. And we could say that about everyone else in here. I think God knows us. I would say God knows us really well, right? knows not only the parts of us that other people can see, but He knows, our hearts. He knows those parts of us that people cannot see, all those flaws and all that kind of stuff, okay? God knows me. He knows my bad parts just as well as He does our good parts. But for us to have a relationship with God, of course, there's somebody's alarm. I thought that was mine for a second. It's not mine, is it? Okay. All right. Sarah's. Embarrassing for Sarah over there.
Sorry.
Usually that's like an alarm I would set to go, all right, it's time to be at Bible class, to teach Bible class, whatever. Anyway, for us to have a relationship with God, we need to know something about God, don't we? We need to understand what He's all about. We need to understand His very nature. We need to understand our Creator for us to have that good relationship with God. I would hope that every head in here would be thinking, absolutely, okay? I think that applies to everybody on the planet. Not only the people here in this auditorium, but if you believe in God, which I think a lot of people on this planet still do today. But a lot of people on this planet say they believe in a God, a Creator, and then they have a tough time really acknowledging what God is all about. Maybe they kind of understand some of the things that God's supposed to be about, but they want to go, I don't know if I want to be about that. Okay, I still believe in a God, but I don't know if I want to buy into that. And so...
And some of them have been through some really tough times, and they're like, why would God let that happen to me?
Oh, certainly.
And they turn their back.
Certainly. I think it really probably applies to every one of us in here.
But we didn't turn our back.
Right. That's a tough...
Because you have
That becomes a tough time for all of us.
You just have to think, what am I to learn from this?
Mm-hmm.
You can't go, oh, why did God do that to me? You have to think, what am I to learn from this?
For sure. And Sharon, speaking to just our thoughts towards God. We'll talk more about that. Our thoughts towards God, and especially how those can be impacted by the tough things that happen in our lives. And I promise you, those things come at everybody. Everybody. And if they haven't already in your life, they will. They will. Okay? They're going to. They're absolutely going to. And I remember hearing that back when I was probably 20, 22, 23 years old from a preacher out at Carrie grew up at the Highway 36 church right outside of Abilene, and I remember hearing that from the preacher out there and him saying that, and me thinking, oh, goodness, I'm only 22, 23, I don't think anything. Tanner's probably sitting over there right now going, oh, my heavens, Things come at you in life, and they will, and they'll test you, and they'll be tough, and they'll be really, really difficult, all right? But they really should not change our perspective of God and God's love for us and what He's done for us. And I think most all of you know that, understand that.
I think that just as we play a game, we have to have the rules. And how are we going to know how to play that game if we don't know what the rules are?
Yeah.
And so God had His chosen people.
Mm-hmm.
And He wanted them to do certain things in order to stay in a situation, a relationship with Him.
Right.
And so how else were they going to know what He wanted unless He gave them that set of rules? That's where
Sure.
the Ten Commandments came in.
Perfect. It's a lead in to just kind of our next step here, but Tiffany wants to say something as well. Go ahead.
Just thinking about how you said, we get kind of an insight into who God is through the Ten Commandments. He's always been about relationships, and He always gives us a way back to him. He always is pursuing us with a way to come back to him.
Yeah. It's a difference from the analogy that I painted earlier about you dating your spouse and you know, just dating anybody, starting to ask them questions about themselves and all that kind of stuff. Probably a lot of us went through some relationships where we thought we had found our person, right? And then as we kind of asked those questions and moved down that road, that ended up not being our person. So the difference in that analogy and what Tiffany's saying is God's always that person. He's there for us. And it's really not a matter of him, again, knowing us so much. He knows us, and he accepts us, and he loves us. His love's unconditional. Again, it's about him describing himself to us and us receiving that, being receptive to that. And so going back to God's rules, basically, here in the Ten Commandments. Again, all right, so here we are in Exodus chapter 20, and God is now giving the Ten Commandments to the Israelite people, all right? And basically, when you think about it, in Exodus chapter 20, and I want us to keep this in perspective because it's easily lost. We see this image, especially teenagers, I think, maybe some young adults, I don't know, maybe us in the room. And if I were to just ask a quick question, all right, you got to have a quick response. You're on Jeopardy all of a sudden. You know, who gave the Ten Commandments? You know, a bunch of us might say, Moses. Moses gave the Ten Commandments. Moses brought those down the mountain and presented them to the Israelite people, okay? God gave the Ten Commandments, right? Those came from the mouth of God. And so they're not a descriptor of what Moses wants. They're not a descriptor of Moses' personality, what he's all about. They're from God, okay? So I'll give you this image. But I'll ask this question because I asked it to our teenagers a year and a half ago. Okay? Do the Ten Commandments still apply to us today? I see quite a few heads moving this way. Boy, in the secular world, if I could go ask this question in front of all of America, I would think I would see equally as many heads doing this right here.
Or what is the Ten Commandments?
Yeah. What are the Ten Commandments? Do they still apply to us today? That's a tough question. A lot of teenagers, when I ask that question, kind of scratch their head and they put their head down like teenagers do and look at the floor like, don't call on me. I don't want to answer that question. Okay? Which is fine. I mean, we do that as adults too. I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. I do have my opinion on it, and I'll give it to you here in a minute. But anybody?
I have a little problem with honoring the Sabbath.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Not a problem.
I'm hearing some things. Say it again. We have.
So, she's saying honoring the Sabbath, she's not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She has a problem with honoring the Sabbath.
Okay, so we're getting into specifics. I got you. Okay. And that's great because we're going to go through each particular one, of course, and talk about each one individually. So I hear you. And yes, as a matter of fact, I think on that commandment, I have this question again, to ask that question because it's probably the toughest one where everybody pauses and goes, well, I don't know about that one. Sarah?
They're still they reveal the Lord to us, and they reveal what is good in the eyes of the Lord. And they're still a good guide for us about how to live our life, but we are not saved through them anymore.
Yeah. Good point. And that goes to Pat, did you want to tag on to that?
So to that point, that we don't keep the Sabbath, right? We don't keep the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And you know, we stop.
No. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so I thought you were putting your hand up like that.
No, I'm just I'm trying to listen.
if we don't keep the Sabbath, then we don't keep that law, right? And if we break any part of the law, we've broken all of the law. Therefore, the law that cannot apply to us today, because we are under the grace of Jesus Christ. We're under the grace of God through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Now, we keep these commandments other than keeping the Sabbath, right? But I think we don't intentionally break any of these commandments out of love, because this is what God has given us grace. Therefore, our response in love is to treat one another exactly the way Jesus said. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That encompasses all of this except keeping the Sabbath. That's my thought.
Yeah, and good points, very good points. And of course, as we close in on the Sabbath, and I'm going to try to wrap this up because we've only got a couple of minutes left here. But as we close in on that commandment, we'll look at it in more detail. But I want us to understand before we close today that, in my opinion, do the Ten Commandments still apply to us today? And you've all seen the news over the last 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years maybe. All these different courthouses around the nation, around the country that have the Ten Commandments, a monument out front or whatever that now maybe have been taken down. And people have gotten real offended by, I guess that's the word that we should use. There's been a lot of controversy as to whether these apply to us still today in 2022. I want you to understand that is a very different question than the question of, are we still saved by following the Ten Commandments today? Okay? To, I think, all of us in this room, that second question would be absolutely not. We're saved by the blood of Christ that covers us every day and makes us white as snow. Okay? But that question is very different than this one. Okay? Do the Ten Commandments still apply to us today? Can we still make them applicable to today in 2022? And I think as we move through these, and we understand and we really embrace that the Ten Commandments tell us about the nature of God, then I think we'll kind of go, well, I think really at heart, I think really if that's what God's about, shouldn't I be about those same things? And maybe even, believe it or not, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Okay? I don't want to scare anybody, make you angry, make you leave here thinking Kurt's crazy, all right? But maybe as we look at those, we'll have a little understanding of that. I think this, and I'll finish on this slide, I think God gives us the Ten Commandments in a roundabout way to say, if you want to live the most blessed life, okay, making decisions that I, as God, your Creator, can bless, then this is what you need to know. These are the things I'm about. Here's who I am. Okay? And I've said this upstairs in our probably Wednesday night men's class and our adult class upstairs in the past year or two. And I just say it because I read it probably in the past year. And the more I read it, the more I believe it. Is that God's love is God's love is unconditional. Okay? He loves us all unconditionally. I believe that. His blessings are not unconditional. Okay? God's love is unconditional. His blessings are not. What that simply means is that He created every single one of us. He loves every single one of us. Even those people that you encounter throughout the week that you cannot believe God loves that person. Okay? I hate to say that, but I encounter those kind of people, and sometimes I have to step away and go, golly, God loves that person. All right? But He is not going to bless everything. Okay? He's not going to bless every behavior. He's not going to bless anything that we do. Okay? He tells us what he's about. He tells us his very nature. And I think that's what our study about the Ten Commandments is going to be about. And that's what God wants from us, is if you want to live the most blessed life that I can give you, then here's what I'm about, and you need to try to walk down this road. And so I appreciate your comments this morning. I know we probably have a lot more comments. We won't be together next Sunday morning, but we'll pick back up moving into the actual first of the Ten Commandments. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.